G'day YouTube, this is Necro Arcanist X-Triple-I in association with Banner 1569, bringing you the next chapter in Book 1 of the Necrosis Chronicles, Hell's Crusade. If you have not yet watched chapters 1 through 9, do so now to avoid spoilers. Previously on Hell's Crusade, the Necros march into the school, and after John gives Adele a pep talk on how to stay focused in the heat of battle, she decides to divert the attention of some elite soldiers by herself, causing most of the group to chase her down as John, Luke and Savathane go to interrogate the warden, who was nowhere to be seen. After Raziel saves Adele's life and frightens her by losing control of his vampiric bloodlust, she confesses that she has fallen in love with him due to the way he has always been at her side to protect her. But before Raziel can give a comment, the pair are cornered by soldiers. With his demonic adrenaline rising, Raziel somehow summons the creature to destroy the opposition in the blink of an eye. Now that everybody has caught up and requiring an explanation as to what the fuck just happened, this is Hell's Crusade, Chapter 10, and Justice for All. Once Raziel had fully awakened, everybody was asking about what had just happened. I have no idea, he said. All I know was I was going to charge up a spell to take those soldiers out. Then, in a flash of light, I was in some sort of limbo realm, a pocket of non-existence between dimensions. I was yelling out for somebody to get me out, and this black knight appeared from out of nowhere. I asked him who he was, and he said, Raziel did his best to recreate how he had heard the knight's voice, which was a disturbingly distorted version of his own voice. I am Odeon, horseman of the eternal night. You have summoned me here, and in turn yourself. I asked him, what do you mean summoned? He said, there exists such a thing as counterparts. For every man, woman, and child born, there is an angel born in heaven, and there is a demon born in hell, that both try to persuade their personal human counterpart towards their side. Then, a third counterpart exists as a neutral party, an entity harboured within the human soul, that feeds on the person's psyche and takes a form that befits them. We go by many names: guardian angels, spirit guides, ancestral souls. When that person dies, we travel to purgatory, where our morality is judged, depending on our creator's moral compass, ranging from good and evil, order and chaos. We are either sent to heaven or hell, and the soul is infused into our waiting counterpart, giving us a chance to participate in the war of end days. So basically, Odeon was a spirit entity that lives inside my soul, and the only question I had left was, why were the two of us wherever we were? And he said, because whenever a person's will and emotions are strong enough, they can summon their spirits to aid them in battle. In ages past, we were given names such as Espers, Eidolons, Guardian Forces, Aeons, and Avatars. Summoning is a forbidden art, as the powers of the entity are great in power, as you shall see when we become one to slay those who dare stand against you. Become one, I asked. Yes. The summoner retains his thoughts, memories, and free will to do as they please, but the summoned spirit takes over their physical body, giving them power beyond their wildest dreams. To summon is a powerful art and can be used at any time, but also at a cost. Power like this will taint the mind of the summoner over time, and they can be driven into madness or worse. Abusing the power of summoning can also drastically shorten the summoner's lifespan. I attempted to repeat what he said just to see if I understood, and said that using the power of summoning a lot will slowly destroy my true body, and Odeon replied yes. Then I hypothesized that if I were to only use the power in short bursts, if I'm up against an enemy that is too powerful and I'm desperate to slay it for whatever reason, it would have little negative effect, and he also replied yes. Then without warning, everything went dark, and when I could see again, I realised I was in the body of Odeon, and I knew what had to be done. "Well," said Dante in an Italian mafia-style voice, "you'll manage to get the power, next you'll get the money, then you'll get the women." Everybody just stared at Dante. "You idiot," said John. "Anyway, Bob, Fang and I found something. Now that we've regrouped, let's go." Everybody started to head back inside, and Raziel pulled his scarf back up and went to follow, but Adele stopped him. "I need to know something, Raziel," she said, but Raziel shushed her. "I know what you're going to say," he said, "and you shouldn't be embarrassed. To be honest, it will beat having a loser brother-in-law to worry about when I already have Dante around to be a pain in the ass. Does this mean... if it means that much to you, I will." Adele smiled and kissed Raziel on his cheek. "Let's go then," she said. "The others are going to be waiting for us." "I wonder what they're going to say when they find out though," said Raziel. "We'll worry about it later." A minute later, everybody had gathered in the warden's office just to see Raziel and Adele barge in. "And where were you two?" asked Dante smugly. "We saw a soldier trying to bring in reinforcements," said Raziel, "so we killed him." "Is that so?" John hit Dante with the back of his hand. "And what the hell was that for?" shouted Dante. "You know what," said John, as he turned to Raziel and Adele. "We found this right here, but I got no idea how far down it goes. Now that you're here, Adele, we can use your wings as a light source." Adele nodded and spread her wings out as far as she could to fit them in the doorway, and the light that came out instantly blinded everyone. "Nice one," said John. "We'll be able to see all the way down to hell itself, if it leads that far." Everybody nodded and started to head down the staircase, but Brian stopped and stared into the inky blackness. "What's the matter, Brian?" asked Dante. "You scared?" "No, I just had a thought," said Brian. "I'll stay up here and barricade the door behind us in case more soldiers come. I'll catch up when it's safe." "Coward." "Look who's talking," cried out John. Everyone except for Brian finally went down the staircase, and minutes later, approximately halfway down, Stan and Luke stopped from exhaustion. "I'm getting too old for this shit," said Luke. "You have it easy," said Stan. "I don't know why I'm wearing this fucking thing." Stan took his helmet off and sighed a breath of relief. Then he looked up and saw that Dante was sliding down the handrail of the staircase. As he passed by, Dante tripped and fell off the handrail. Both Stan and Luke looked over the rail to look for Dante, who just slowly floated up on his wings and landed on the stairs, leaning on the rail. "You bastards!" he screeched. "Why the fuck didn't you catch me?" "You shouldn't have been sliding down on the rail," said Raziel as he came down the steps. "So where's your girlfriend?" asked Dante. "Further up. She can't take the heat, so Fang's giving her a lift. You know, I never really noticed until now, due to the surprisingly cold weather we've been having, but he's like a walking air conditioner." Luke began to laugh. "It'd be funny if you two started dating," he said. "Why would that be funny?" asked Raziel. "Well, look at her. Then look at you. It's like when your parents started dating. Your dad was this big-ass battle-hardened soldier just come back from the war, and he goes and hooks up with this gorgeous chick with advanced degrees in science that's way out of his league. You're a vampire and she's half angel, demon, thingy. Nephilim. Yeah, that. I just don't see it working out." "Well, I've seen stranger relationships. Dante's obsession for his hair, for one." Dante then pushed Raziel over in protest. "Well, I'd expect that from a teenage girl," said Raziel, "not an adult bloke." At that moment, Vincent came stomping down, with Saberfang and Adele not far behind him. "Where's Dad and Jack?" asked Raziel. "They says they can't be bothered walking," replied Vincent. "Says jump down." "Jump?" Suddenly, the two men could be heard yelling out with delight higher up. They rushed past everybody else, diving through the central gap in the staircase, and everybody looked over the side of the handrail, watching them plummet into oblivion. "Those are two crazy bastards," commented Stan. "I know," replied Raziel, "but they do have a point." Raziel lifted himself up and over the handrail, allowing himself to fall down. Dante and Vincent soon followed, but nobody else did. Just before they hit the ground, the three brothers let loose their wings and drifted to the ground where John and Jack were waiting. Luke and Stanton came down by sliding down the handrail just like Dante was. And finally Saberfang, still with Adele atop his back, was using his expert agility to run down the wall in a spiral formation. John then looked up, and there was no sign of the afternoon sun, just more blackness. No light source was particularly helpful apart from Adele's wings, but Luke had a torch in his pocket that he took out and shone around the area. He eventually found a colossal locked wooden door big enough to fit a tank inside, and it was bordered by an archway full of statues that on average were about the size of Raziel, and they had engravings with subtitles that explain their strange designs. Starting from the bottom left and following the arch, the first statue depicted a man ripping out his eyeballs with his mouth open as if he were crying. This was called Anima Miseria. Just above that was a statue of a man ripping out a woman's heart as she cried. This was called Pride of Lust. The next statue was of a skull that was devouring children. This was called Innocence's End. The next statue was of a man with a hunchback, crawling on all fours. His back was turned, but his head was twisted as far back as the neck would allow to show his face, which was demonically distorted with bulging eyes, a torn-off nose, and mouth grinning in an evil smile. His hands were holding something small that was unable to make out. This was called Corruption of Power. Skipping the statue at the top of the arch and going to the next one on the right was of a demon sitting on his throne, seemingly content with a woman with an eerily familiar face thrashing around as she was impaled on a spear that the demon was holding, dripping blood onto him. This was called a pact sealed. Going down, the next statue was that of a naked woman standing with her back turned to a mirror, and a fearful gaze could be seen in her eyes, and both of her hands were crossed over her heart as the demon in the mirror was reaching out in an attempt to drag her in. This was called the Devil Inside. The next statue was of a grotesque monster that was like a human, but with 4 legs. Its chest was a mass of screaming faces, and its head and stomach both had giant mouths that opened sideways, mourning over a dead man. This was called Evolution of Wrath. The next statue was of a dragon that lay dying at the hands of an angelic goddess, and this was called Full Circle. The next statue was of a priest praying, and demonic wings sprouted off his back as the man smiled evilly. This was called the Princess's Advocate. Finally, the topmost statue was massive, and was more a mural than anything else, depicting a cataclysmic disaster. It was captioned with the phrase, Ad ruinam regna deus. And everybody's eyes turned to Raziel, who began translating it. It's a Latin phrase, I know that much, he said. Some time passed, and eventually Raziel began to act intrigued. With the best possible translation, the script says, Ruination to the kingdoms of God. Eerie, commented Stan. I don't like the sound of that. Furthermore, I don't know what's on the other side of this fucking door. John tapped on the metal bracing with his scythe. We're just gonna have to find out, he said. Then we can put an end to this bloody place. But we need a way to open that door. Stan looked down at the giant knife-shaped claw in his left hand. I could try to pry it open, he said. Best let me try it, said John. I've got a method planned out. Stan let go of the handle inside the katol and let it drop to the ground. John picked it up and wielded it, apparently trying to gain a feel for the weapon's size and weight. Then, he walked up the wall calmly, spreading his arms out to gain balance, keeping the blade in his left hand and his scythe in the right. John managed to walk halfway up the door before he turned to the gap in the middle of the double door. John swung his scythe and plunged it into the wood below him, and using both hands, John then shoved the katol into the gap in the door and tried to wedge it open. Shit, it's not gonna budge, he said. The door's too thick. Everybody looked around, and Stan noticed a thick bar of iron resembling Jack's sword, but was half the width along the face of the blade and 3 times longer. Vincent picked it up and squeezed one end of the bar to make a handle. He then tried to pick it up with both hands, but he could not maintain the balance. It's too wobbly, he said. Stan walked over and grabbed the blade off of Vincent, and then proceeded to drag the bar along the floor. and the sparks of the iron scraping across the concrete floor ignited the ground like candlelight. "What are you doing?" asked Dante. "I don't know," replied Stan, "but this feels right." John grabbed a katol and his scythe and leapt off the door to make way for Stan. "Well, we could try my sword first," said Jack. Stan stopped walking towards the door. "Alright," he said. "But if that doesn't work, we're gonna chop this fucker down with this thing if it fails." Jack turned around and aimed his sword at the gap, shoving it in. At first it would not fit due to its thickness, but after enough struggling, Jack managed to wedge the blade in. Vincent took over and carefully used the sword as a lever, opening the door. Once it was open enough, Vincent wedged his arm in through the gap and ripped the door open. Lifting his leg up, he pinned the door open, preventing it from closing. Stan tossed the iron bar aside as the smoky haze poured out of the room inside. John carefully took notice that while the outside edge of the door was wooden, the inside half was similar in material and texture to that of Stan's helmet. Thick iron barding bolted into place, and slightly thinner metal plating that was dented to make a crisscross pattern. The smoke was becoming thicker by the second, and it caused everybody to choke. Adele lowered the veil over her face to protect her eyes, while Raziel pulled his scarf up higher. Dante then wrapped his hair around his face like his brother's scarf, but it had almost no effect. John breathed deeply, with his eyes watering with intense pain. "This is not smoke," he claimed. "It's ash. Something inside here is burning." Once everybody was inside, Vincent let the door shut itself, with everybody trapped inside. An eerie, raspy, and unintelligent whisper echoed throughout the room. John then passed Stan his katol, with the latter slipping onto his arm to prepare for whatever hid in the haze. Suddenly, the door burst into flames, preventing the Necros from escaping. The fire ran across the wall like a nest of vipers reaching out. Then Dante stepped forward in front of the group and span his sword around in front of him. "Gaspless!" he cried. A whirlwind surrounded Dante, and it blew away the nearby ashes far enough to reveal a monstrous silhouette in the distance. Beyond that, somebody was heard screaming in torturous anguish. The room grew louder and louder, with the ambient noise of cogs grinding up against each other, and the sound of scraping steel pierced the minds of the Necros. Barely audible were other unidentifiable mechanical noises, which seemed to be similar to steam engines and pistons, among other things. Then the ominous voice spoke. "So let it be written. So let it be done. I am sanctified for the chosen one. Blood running red and strong, there is no denial. I bring plague and darkness 3 days long. Hail to the fire. Die by my hand as I creep across the land, killing firstborn man. I rule the midnight air as the destroyer. Born I shall soon be there for their deadly mass. I creep up the steps and floor towards the final darkness. I am creeping death." The ashen haze lifted partially, so that the Necros could finally see the room around them, which was a horrifying spectacle to behold. In a broken ring with a gap for the doorway, there were 7 giant machines, powered by children slaves pushing a giant around and around in a mindless trance. Every so often, one of the children fainted and was slowly pushed out of the way into a pit of lava below. Atop the machines was a black and yellow crystal with a fleshy texture, and giants powered the crystals so that they glowed, and every child that died boosted the crystal's power output. Once the crystal stored enough energy, a massive archway, similar to the doorway outside, which had a similar but far larger crystal embedded in the top, siphoned the energy via the small crystal firing electricity into the large one. Nearby the large mechanical spires were iron pipes that dumped more and more children onto machines to replace those that were lost. Large spaces in the walls were occult symbols painted in blood, and a particular symbol was painted on the iron floor. One large ring with 3 smaller circles inside. Random symbols were painted around the small circles, but not inside. Finally, standing within this massive ring was a colossal, 4-legged, skeleton construct made out of bone and partially plated in steel. 2 swords lodged in its back had a series of chains and blades fused to the ends of the hilts, which spread out to resemble wings. Its ribcage held a charred corpse inside like a cage, the pelvis acting as the floor. The beast reached into its own chest and ripped the ribs apart, releasing the body inside. Each rib was now able to move independently at varying speeds, flowing in and out as if lungs were inside. The skull had triple rows of fanged teeth in each jaw. Natural spikes of bone formed horns that started with 3 massive horns in the center of the forehead and on either temple, then trailed down the spine, each spike increasingly smaller to the tailbone, which was reminiscent of a scorpion's tail. Each arm had 3 joints connecting to half-meter long bones and had iron spikes fused to the wrists, each blade as long as the entire arm itself. Each of its legs ended in a hoof encrusted in rotten flesh, and its open jaw partially held extremely long tongues that oozed black slime that dripped over the monster's various body parts. Each eyeball was an ever-burning shard of coal, burning soullessly red. It let out a monstrous roar, and the entire room was filled with a red light. Adele promptly fainted and dropped to her knees in a catatonic trance. John and Raziel rushed to her side, with the former attempting to lift her head up. The instant John touched her forehead, his mind was full of nightmarish visions about destruction incarnate. John ripped his fingers away to reveal that they were scorched with 3rd-degree burns that began to blister. "So," said the creature, "she is here. I have been called to take her back to where you belong, and slay the firstborn who have steered the daughter of the chosen one away from her destiny." John looked up, clutching his wrist. "If you mean me as the firstborn, you have no idea who the fuck you're dealing with, mate." "No, you're firstborn." John readied his scythe and looked at Raziel, then back at the monster. "If you know that Raziel is my firstborn son, then you should also know that as his father, the Arcanist, I won't let you try and harm him." The monster snarled in disgust. "Your valiant spirit is poison to one who knows nothing but pestilence. If you shall not give the dreamer to me, then I shall take her from your imprisonment by force." The long tongue shot out from under the beast's jaw, threading through the ribs, and reached out in an attempt to grab Adele. Raziel stepped out to shield her, so the tongues wrapped around his arms and legs, and they threw him into the ground. "Your infatuation is fallible," shouted the creature. "There is no hope for you, should you hold on to her." Raziel picked himself up and began threatening the beast. "Smart-ass coward! Give me your name so I may carve it in the trophy I'll make from your corpse." "I have no true name. I am but the chief assassin, sent from the depths of hell. I am but the bones of all those crucified upon Golgotha Hill, alongside the Son of God." "Then you are the Golgothan, and I am the one horseman of the apocalypse. Odeon, come!" Raziel turned into a black mist that spread out and took the form of Odeon, who stepped over everybody else and charged at the Golgothan. His horse impaled the beast with his spear horn, while the knight slashed at him with his sword, running past the Golgothan and running alongside the wall, preparing to run past and strike back. However, the Golgothan was waiting for this, and swung his scorpion tail into the horse's legs, crippling it. Odeon crashed into the ground and faded back to Raziel, who struggled to get back to his feet. And everybody else rushed to his aid, striking at the Golgothan with their weapons and magic. Stanton jumped at the beast, landing on the pelvis and proceeding to rapidly stab at the base of the skull. However, the ribs closed in on him, and the bladed wings curled around, proceeding to shred the skin from his back. The whirlwind of blades made it difficult for anybody to get close enough to attempt to free Stan, so all they could do was watch in horror as Stan screamed. Eventually, he thrashed about so much that he burst out of the ribcage and fell out, his back a mutilated mess. The Golgothan thrust his swords out in an attempt to finish him off, but then the blood pouring out of Stan's back rose up and stood as if it was solid. forming an interconnected mesh on either side of the spine. They then folded over Stan's back and blocked the incoming attack. Stan then dashed forward, skidded across the floor, and turned around like a bull in a fighting ring. Stan then slammed into the Golgothan with his giant helmet, breaking part of the spine. Vincent then jumped up, his wings proudly displayed as he drifted through the air. He dove down into the Golgothan and impaled the skull with his gun sword. He flew up to the left and slashed down, then flew back up to the right and slashed down, flying in front of the beast. He plummeted down while spinning in midair and impaled the Golgothan through the head. Sabafang jumped back and fired razor hail upon the Golgothan, which seemed to be the only thing so far that actually caused it pain. "He seems to draw power from the flames," said Sabafang. "He should chill out." Sabafang then breathed an entire blizzard from his mouth, enveloping the creature. Sabafang stopped breathing ice and looked at what he had done. The fire in the Golgothan's eyes had burned out. "You fools!" he screeched in a higher-pitched voice. "What have you done to me?" The iron armour began to fall off of the Golgothan's body. "If I go down, she's coming with me." The beast exploded in the ashes that raced forward, taking on the shape of its head, only larger, and attempted to devour the still entranced Adele. It moved too fast for anybody to stop, and as it was about to claim its victim, it exploded into a burst of flame. When the smoke cleared, Luke was standing over Adele, his magnum with a smoking barrel. "Adios," said Luke, as he used the heat of the barrel to ignite a cigarette in his mouth. Then he took a deep breath and blew a ring of smoke, which, like the rest of the smoke in the room, was suddenly absorbed by the crystal in the room. "Get her out of here, Fang," said John. Vincent walked over to the door and kicked it open. Then John picked up Adele and placed it on Sabafang's back, allowing him to leave the room. Vincent then shut the door, which made a harrowing screech as it shut, which it did not do the first time. Everybody turned to the mysterious gate, which was cloaked in shadow. Suddenly, the crystals atop the towering machine shattered, and the shards flew into the gate crystal. The gate then began to open slowly, revealing a pinkish mist behind it that led to a deep red vortex that swirled around like water draining out of a sink. A figure started to scream as it was chained to the archway by the wrists. John ran up and cut the chains, setting the figure free. Confused, John noticed something strange as he examined the figure's cultist-style clothes, but he did not fully realise it until the figure had fully stood up. It then erupted into fire, incinerating the robes to reveal a 9-foot-tall demon with long black hair like Dante's, only it was tied back at the end. 3 horns along the eyebrow line added another half-foot to the demon's already impressive stature. His colossal wings nearly spanned the entire archway, and he wore a spiked pauldron over his shoulder that was chained to his body like John and Vincent's armour. Embedded in the left side of his chest, a largish, dull crystalline formation jutted out of his flesh, and was covered by the chains on the pauldron as some form of protection. The entire bottom half of his body, apart from his sharp tail, was covered in a thick layer of brown hair and had clawed hooves for feet. His left arm had a spike protruding from the elbow, and his lower right arm was covered in semi-molten rock. Veins of lava visibly flowed underneath the skin. He grabbed the 6-foot John by the collar with his giant hand and hoisted him into the air, screaming in a powerful, confident voice, "Do you have any idea what you have done? You have damned these poor souls." The demon threw John across the room and turned to try and close the gate by holding the door shut, but it was no good as they slowly continued to open. The Necros ready to attack, but John ordered them to wait. "Let's hear him out." John walked up to the demon and grabbed him by the shoulder, forcing him to turn around. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "I am trying to protect these children," said the demon, "as repentance for my failure." The demon turned around and tried to close the gate again, but he still failed. Raziel revealed his demonic eye and stared at the demon. The radiance coming from the gate glinted in his eye, and he suddenly came to a conclusion. "Unusual for such a being to harbour a heart of light," he said. The demon stopped struggling and turned around to face Raziel. How do you know? Asked the demon. Raziel allowed his hair to cover the eye again. I can tell, he said. You have the true sight. Unusual for a human-born child. I am not human. My body is dead, but my heart still beats. Who are you? The demon sighed and crouched on the ground. I used to be the Archangel of Justice, but my soul was taken captive in a fierce battle with the demons, and I was reborn in the body of an Antichrist. You mean the Antichrist? No, there are many of us. Some not even male. The direct sons and daughters of Lucifer are raised for one thing, to slay God's only begotten Son. But I still bore my divine soul, and I was able to escape the corruption of my pseudo-siblings. Many thousands of years later, I received word that yet another child was born, and he was to be the one. The one. Yes, the one. The one to lead us in the battle to slay Christ. But I have not received his name. As a deserter, it was forbidden knowledge for me to know the name of my replacement. It was not soon after that I heard of my older sister bearing Nephilim children with one of my old comrades taken hostage. I had hoped to take him and his children to safety, but I eventually found his grave. Soon after, I heard there was an infernal gate, which shall be used to send a flood of demons, led by my younger brother, towards the earth to draw out Christ for the second advent and slay him. What could I do? I used all my strength to chain myself to this gate to prevent it from opening. I have failed those I even remotely cared for, so I'm not going to fail the children when they are pushing themselves to the depths. Every life drowned in the lake of fire is a scar on my soul, and I can no longer bear the pain. Your story of the Nephilim rings familiar, said John. We've sheltered a Nephilim girl in this town after a demon mother tried to sacrifice her and her sister and killed her angel father. She might be your niece. The demon stood up straight and held his arm out in greeting. Then you shall gain my alliance, he said. I am Spiran Helyan, Archdemon of the Flame. John held his arm out and shook the demon's hand. A discharge of red lightning shot out and harmlessly electrocuted Spiran, causing the ruby embedded in his chest to glow a vivid scarlet. The Necros each made their introductions and they set out for the door. Hold on, said Raziel to the demon Spiran. What about your quest? The children? Asked the demon. They are doomed either way. However, this gate still causes me a concern. The material of the archway holds the gate intact and there is no way to close it. John scratched his chin and growled in thought. That gem seems to power the gate, he said, but it's a bit high up for us to reach. No sweat, said Luke as he jumped up and tried to strike the crystal with his axe. In self-defense, the crystal shocked Luke with lightning that sent him crashing to the floor, gasping for air. Stan turned for the door and he tried to open it, but it would not budge. It's stuck, he yelled. Vincent then looked down at the floor. Metal bar stuck in door, he said. Vincent walked over and reached down, pulling the iron bar out of the bottom of the door. Once it was free, the door was able to open again. We could throw this at Crystal, but it's wobbly, he said. Why don't you bend it, Vincent, said John. Notice how one side is long and one side is short. Bend the short side as far as you can. Vincent nodded and he bent the normal side of the bar into another handle. Then he held the bar up on his shoulders with the edge instead of the face against the back of his neck. Cringing with all his might, Vincent slowly bent the bar until it had a large curve in it. It's hard bending that side, said Vincent. I should try the other way. No, it's alright, boy, said John. Just pass it here, mate. Vincent nodded and tossed the bent bar to John. It pays off to have an aborigine on hand, eh? He said as he aimed the bar up high and threw it like a boomerang. The bar smashed into the archway, shattering it and knocking the crystal off. The crystal then shattered at Raziel's feet, at which point he collected up as much of the fragments as he could and placed them in his jacket pockets. Just a little bit of loot, he said. Now the demons can't come through. Everybody then left through the door. Spiran was the last one out, and as he went to close the door, he looked back at the children, who were still working despite the fact they now had nothing to work for. Before he slammed the door shut, he promised, "Justice shall return." And that was chapter 10. Now, I think Raziel summed up his explanations pretty well. The reason why I gave him this extreme power to summon a demonic Death Knight is because of, you guessed it, Final Fantasy. Yes, this is going to be a recurring theme. I've already said this. Get over it. Starting with the third game, it is possible to summon magical beasts to attack the enemy, and Odeon is a reference to the recurring summon Odin, who is based off of the Norse god and his horse Sleipnir. Final Fantasy's Odin also used the sword Zantetsuken, which is Japanese for steel-cutting sword, to deliver instant death to any enemy he hits. But in some games, Odin can also use Gungnir, otherwise known as the Gunge Lance, to deal heavy non-elemental damage to bosses that can't be one-shotted that easily. However, in some games, Odin is lightning elemental, hence why Odeon makes black sparks when Sleipnir walks, and is accompanied by a thunderstorm. The reason why Raziel mentioned that using a summon can reduce the summoner's lifespan if abused relates to Final Fantasy XIII for the same reason, and to a lesser extent, Final Fantasy VIII, because using summons or guardian forces for a long time can actually cause amnesia. Also, the fact Raziel suggested only calling a summon in short bursts is due to the fact that, until Final Fantasy X, summons were only called out to perform their attack. It was after number 10 that summons could be kept out for longer, and instead must charge up their power by fighting in order to let loose their ultimate ability, which in Odeon's case, as I hinted in the previous chapter, is called Oblivion, the name of Final Fantasy X's Anima's ultimate attack. Now moving on, I know some Twilight fangirls are still going on about Raziel and Adele, but to make a good point, in almost every Final Fantasy game, two main characters are romantically involved. Although a few games such as 4 and 7 have more advanced relationship links, but that's not the point. As I said, I based Hell's Crusade off of Final Fantasy, and as a kid I happened to like vampires, so sue me, don't blame me, blame Twilight. If the writer of Twilight, Osama bin Laden and Hitler were in the same room and I had 2 bullets, I'd shoot the writer of Twilight twice before pistol whipping bin Laden and Hitler in the face. Homicidal thoughts aside. Let's move on to the statues at the bottom of the stairwell. I don't think anybody is going to get these references, but maybe, spoiler alert, they're supposed to foreshadow events later on alongside the Necrosis Chronicles. Some of these are even going to be relevant even in the 4th book, which when I begin recording that in like 2019 or whatever, but I actually wrote the 1st book 3 years ago, and I've only just decided to begin narrating this. Anyway, moving on to the next scene. The idea for having children powering machines through eventually fatal labor is from the game Brutal Legend, as one of the missions involves rescuing a heap of guys from working on a gigantic clockwork machine within a mine. The Golgothan entity, what a scary fucker. He was inspired by the Golgothan from the movie Dogma, which is kind of a funny take on Christianity. Good movie, recommend it. Anyway, the Golgothan in this movie is Hell's chief assassin, created by a number of people crucified on Golgotha Hill alongside Jesus Christ, the Son of God. Since corpses tend to shit themselves not long after death, all that shit seeped into hell and created a gigantic, walking, talking shit devil. However, because Hell's Crusade is not really comedic, sure there are a fair few funny parts, but that's just to ease the tension, I just changed the Golgothan from the shit of corpses to the actual corpses themselves, which would make a bit more sense. I mean, think about it. A giant shit demon would either dissolve in the rain, get eaten by mold or insects, or in a place such as my Golgothan's infernal home, it would just simply bake and petrify into a shit statue. Yeah. On just a little side note, the chanting the Golgothan makes about Raziel and Adele and his purposes are slightly edited lyrics of Metaliica's Creeping Death, which plays during the battle with him. I thought it'd be interesting because both the Golgothan and Creeping Death are biblical references, and I'm not entirely sure about this, but I read somewhere that when the band wrote the song, they were inspired to write the song after watching a Bible movie about the Passover. And one of the band members stated, and I quote, "Whoa, it's like creeping death." And as such, the song is about Passover. Finally, we get to the end of the line. The character of Spiran, the fallen archangel turned Antichrist. His character is an original concept, although I designed him to be Satan-like in appearance as one would expect. However, the title of the chapter, And Justice for All, is an album by Metaliica, and somewhere along the line I hope to use a song of the same name from the same album as Spiran's unofficial theme song. I actually plan to have a system where all major characters have a theme song, so that's why in Chapter 7, Man Without Fear plays in Vincent's Story of Gilgamesh, but in the meantime I've actually found a much better song for him, so I digress. I think that's everything to mention. So, apart from Creeping Death, music credits are Promise from Silent Hill 2, which is actually the original, better version of the song, which is a heavier rock arrangement rather than a sad piano piece at the end of Chapter 6. I only just learned of this, and this sounds so much better, at least to me. Anyway, and it plays during the intro when Raziel explains the true nature of Odeon. In the basement, the tune shifts to Devil's Ambition from Final Fantasy IX, which was during the scene last chapter where Cyberfang explained werewolf culture to John and Luke. During the Golgothan's monologue, the song Clockwork Little Happiness from Silent Hill 3 plays. And after the battle where Spiran is introduced, the tune shifts to the piano version of Promise. Anyway, next time on Hell's Crusade, the Necros return to the surface to find that something has happened while they were underground. A total mystery ensues to discover the cause, and during investigation, a larger conspiracy begins to take root as Raziel locates somebody of great importance. This is Necro Arcanist XIII in association with Bandit 1569 signing off. Stay classy, YouTube.
The time when all will be forgiven their sins, when the paradise we have long dreamed for will arrive. After the judgment and atonement, an eternity of bliss. Oh, Alessa, the world you wanted is nearly here. I wish only for the salvation of mankind. But for that to happen, the world must first be remade.